Hi, and welcome to the third and final in a series of webinars by the Quaker Council for European Affairs on the subject of anti-migrant hate speech. In this video, we'll be talking about ways to have more effective, civil, and constructive conversations about migration, both online and offline. So in the last video, we learned about commonly held myths about migrants and refugees, which we see and hear both in the media and in discussions on the internet relating to migration. We also looked at the way that these can be debunked by simple facts and statistics. But that's only half the struggle. We also need to learn how to have more constructive conversations, which we can use to slowly change people's minds and change people's hearts on this subject. In order to do that, as part of our Choose Respect campaign to tackle anti-migrant hate speech in the context of the European elections this year, we offered some tips to people who maybe aren't sure how to start having difficult conversations about migration with people who might necessarily not share their point of view. Either online or offline, it's important to know the best ways to engage with people in a constructive and civil way so that our discussions about migration don't descend into polarizing arguments. This is something we see happening very often on the internet, and so we thought it would be good to give some ideas of how to avoid it. So let's have a look at the tips that we offered and explore how they can make a difference in your conversations about migration, both online and offline. The first tip is to keep calm. It might sound simple, but this is actually the most important advice of all. It's incredibly easy to dismiss someone as a racist when they have a different opinion about migration to you. And it's quite easy to get angry when both sides feel passionate about a certain topic. And migration is certainly an issue which divides people. But actually, if you can have a civil conversation and keep your cool, even if the other party doesn't, then you have a kind of moral high ground. And actually, you'll be surprised at how often, when you step out of the polarizing, confrontational style of discussion, how reactive people can be. We learned during the Choose Respect campaign that if we replied to examples of hate speech on social media in a civil and polite way, asking people to reconsider their views and their choice of words, as opposed to just simply dismissing them by calling them racist, then we found that people's responses became more and more civil, moved from capital letters and kind of confrontational terms to something much more civil and conversational. And even if we can talk politely to a few people and change their way of engaging with others on the internet, we can already make a big difference. Civility, politeness, and conversation are never to be underestimated. The second piece of advice is to know your audience. Everyone has different motivations behind their political views and things that they say, and it's often the case that people who are concerned about migration might actually have proxy concerns about other issues, like the provision of public services in their neighborhood, the changing character of their local high street, or a misunderstanding about other people's religions, which leads to an unnecessary fear of the other. Once you have a quick look at someone's social media profile, think about their personal situation if you know them personally, it's quite easy to understand which arguments will appeal to them and which won't. And you can have a much more effective conversation if you're willing to understand the other people's perspective as well as their concerns. It's not always about migration. Sometimes it's about something else, economic or social. Understanding those motivations will understand the key to the person's suspicions or concerns about migration. It can be as simple as checking their social media profile. The third piece of advice that we offer is to appeal to the heart. Deep down, most people are fundamentally good. They don't want to be unpleasant and they don't want to hate other people. So that's why, even though we focused on a Mythbuster section in the previous video, as well as on our Choose Respect website, it's not enough to focus on facts and statistics. You have to appeal to people's emotions as well. Often it helps to humanize the people who are coming across the Mediterranean as a way of helping others to relate to them better. Think about how they would feel if they were in the situation of having to flee their home country and get in a boat to make a dangerous crossing of the Mediterranean to head for sanctuary. If you can make people put themselves in other people's shoes, you might find that it's even more effective than simply giving them facts and statistics. It's about knowing the balance of that person and understanding that people have empathy even if they don't always have a rational approach to a certain subject. In short, appeal to the heart as well as the mind. Having said that, it's still important to get the facts and share them with others. You never know what a single piece of information from a differing perspective might do for someone's hard-held opinions about migration, migrants, or refugees themselves. Why not link people to the Mythbuster feature on our website, or simply the previous video in this webinar series? You never know what reading or learning process it might trigger to help people change their minds. Not everyone's going to be convinced by facts alone, but sometimes pointing people in the direction of reliable information can start a learning process which really makes a difference. And if people want more comprehensive information than the Choose Respect campaign has provided, websites of organisations working with migrants and refugees, such as the United Nations High Commission on Refugees and the European Asylum Support Office, have a wealth of information which people can explore at their leisure and start to learn the facts behind the headlines. Tip number 5 is to flip the conversation. There are so many positive stories about migrants and refugees out there, but often they get buried behind a wave of populist and negative headlines. Refugees don't contribute to society. Well, what about the refugee who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2018 for her work against sexual trafficking? And in Germany, as we said in the last video, 40% of all new arrivals are already in education, work and training. Migrants and refugees are doing incredible things across Europe. Sometimes you just have to dig a little bit to find out what exactly is going on. And if you can share these stories with others, it might change their perspectives. Many people have approached this issue solely from the perspective of negative and alarmist headlines in certain newspapers. But if we can offer them a human story of contribution and positive change, then you can offer a more nuanced perspective which might start to change people's minds. Tip number 6, work together. If you're exposed to lots of hate speech, either in your domestic life or on the internet, it can be quite demoralizing and saddening. But rest assured, you're not the only one working against this problem out there. There are groups of people and volunteers all across Europe and the wider world who aim to counter hate speech on the internet together. Why not have a look and see if there are some resources in your country or a group which is doing similar work? A great example is in Sweden, where the Jag är här movement, which means I am here, represents a group of 100,000 grassroots volunteers on Facebook who come together to comment en masse against hate speech when it occurs, offering links to statistics, more positive stories, or simply countering messages of hate with love. Why not have a look and see if something like that exists where you are? And if not, why not start one? Working together can be very effective. The final piece of advice we can offer is that if all else fails, report it. Even the most earnest engagement with other people isn't going to change everyone's mind. And there are sadly some people out there whose sole purpose is to offend and cause controversy. In this case, social networks have your back. Almost all of them, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, and others, have a mechanism by which you can report hate speech and remove the offending party from the platform. Remember, these are private platforms. They can choose who takes part and who doesn't. And if someone breaches their rules, you're well within your rights to report them. More information about how to do this can be found on the websites of the respective social networks, or you can find links on the Choose Respect page. Just go on to the chooserespect.eu and click on Positive Narrative Toolkit. We believe that the approach used by Choose Respect that we've outlined in these videos, namely debunking myths and misconceptions with facts and statistics, and engaging constructively with people, politely, as a conversation, not an argument, really are the keys to changing the narrative about migration in Europe. There's clearly a case for deleting hateful comments where the original poster has no obvious desire to engage constructively or to change their opinion. But it never hurts to try, and we believe that if you follow the advice given in this video, as we've seen with Choose Respect, we can really start to change the narrative in Europe. So what are you waiting for? The next time you see an example of xenophobia or hate speech on the internet, or around the dinner table, or in your place of work, start having conversations which engage with people and change their minds. You can do it. That brings us to the end of this video and this webinar series. You can find all the resources that we've discussed in these series of videos on www.chooserespect.eu. If you feel like you've missed anything in this video or have any questions, feel free to watch again or leave us a comment below this video, and we'll do our best to respond as soon as possible. Thank you for watching, and remember, choose respect.